What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the 182 News Podcast. This is your host, poppincurbs, and I can't find gobstoppers to save my life. I can't find gobstoppers. I can't find runts. I don't even want to live in a world where I can't drive around the corner to the nearest gas station and find some gobstoppers. What is the deal? I'm not going the online route. I'm not buying them in bulk. I don't want to deal with it. I want to be able to go to a store in my town and get the sugar that I need for this body, this disgrace of a vessel, to function. This is why there have not been many new podcasts. It's because I don't have enough sugar to function. That's the reason. I'm telling you. Here's a funny fact. If you see me at a nearby hardware store, which will remain unnamed, you might think, oh, Poppin's looking for a new hammer. Oh, hi, Poppin. You must be building a new playset for your children, getting some nice 2x4s. That's why you're here at the hardware store, right? That's why we're both here on a Saturday morning. Nope, you'd be dead wrong. The reason I am at that hardware store is because they have movie theater sized box of Sour Patch Kids, Gobstoppers, bottle caps, sweet tarts, etc. And you know what? I went there recently. It was not to get a hammer. Fuck that hammer. I hate hammers. I hate screwdrivers. I hate wood. I hate being outside. They did not have the gobstoppers. I need these. I will die on this hill. If anyone knows how to get a hold of Mr. Wonka headquarters, I'm going to handwrite a letter to them and I'm going to sign it with warm regards. That's how I'll handle this. That's how shit gets done in this world. Anywho, it has been a little bit. And I think ultimately most of it is I just don't have time. It sucks. I just really don't. I think a lot of us are probably in similar walks of life, around the same age. It's funny when I get my little YouTube analytics, occasionally I'll glance at them. And I remember one time it told me my demographic is basically 25 to 39, all male. Literally, it said 100% male. And I was thinking in my head, I know at least like 3 girls listen to this. My point there is, I think a lot of us are probably in a similar stage of this life where it's just busy and it's just stressful. And I find myself just not having time. And at the end of these days, I'm just completely worn out. I've only got 20 or 30 minutes, I feel like most days, to do anything I want to do, much less hobbies here and there. And most of the time, I find myself just watching a game, trying to play a game, plopping down on a couch and staring at my phone for 25 minutes before I'm tired and have to go back to sleep and do the same thing the next day. And if you are like me and feel like that, you are not alone because it is stressful. And I'm kind of one of those that kind of just tucks myself away and I put my head down and I work hard and do what I need to do for the family and for the kids. And I don't always think about myself or take care of myself. And then you look up and years are flying by and it's just crazy. So lately, I mean, between my 2 little ones, whom I love more than anything in the world, take so much of your time and will have you at a whole new level of patience you did not know you had to have to deal with the little ones. And I'm just exhausted. I feel like I'm fucking exhausted 24/7. And I just haven't had time for the podcast. I'm trying to remember what the last one was. I know we spoke with Driveways, one of my favorite bands. I've seen them out on tour quite a bit lately. Haven't been able to catch a show, but they were hitting the West Coast, which is rad. I saw they played a show in Denver, which is awesome. So I hope that episode introduced some of you all to them. And I believe where we left off was the Thumbs interview. And I really enjoyed that one. Thumbs is an artist who created a rad bass by the same name for Mark. And we talked about his creative process, how that story came to be. I always appreciate artists coming on and chatting with them because I like to know people's stories, and I like to know how people tick, what made them go down that career path, what obstacles did they have to overcome. A lot of them have some sort of point in their lives where they had to take a chance on themselves and put the haters aside or the doubters aside and be like, yo, I'm going for this. And ultimately, what I've found when I've talked to those people is they seem to be happier. And yeah, it can be a struggle as an artist, or you may not have as much money, or you may struggle to make dues or pay rent or whatever. But what's fascinating to me is when I speak to a lot of these folks, they seem a lot happier than I do most of the time. So I really appreciated him getting on there and sharing his story. One of the things that really stood out to me, and I've had a little bit of time to think back and kind of ponder on some of the stuff that I've done throughout the years. Um, he said that his mantra when it comes to creating is do something you love. And naturally, like-minded folks will kind of gather and come around and find your stuff and discover you. And really it'll build naturally that way. And that's something about that whole conversation. When I think back to that, here we are months out. That's what sticks out to me about that convo. And it's really rad. And it's something that for me, from day one on the podcast, that's how I approach this thing. I love Blink. I love sharing Blink lore. I love sharing Blink history, Blink stories. I wanted to hear from more people. Everybody's got these awesome stories from now over 30 years of this band existing. There's so many folks along the way who have stuff to share that I wasn't seeing elsewhere. You know, there's tons of Blink social media fan accounts. And at the time, I just wasn't getting the side of things that I wanted to personally hear. I wanted to hear about the collectibles side of things and creating the hardware, the bases, and the technical side of things. You know, I wasn't getting that, and that's part of why I created this podcast. And throughout this journey, obviously, it's awesome to have some sort of listener fan base who I very much appreciate. And this has always been a creative outlet for me to really chat and build up some sort of community and friendship with like-minded folks who love Blink. And so that stood out to me. I think it always will when I listen back to that and think back to that convo. So if you are on the verge of creating something or taking a big leap, I want you to think about some of this stuff. When I drop these episodes, as rare as they may seem now, I want you all to be able to take something in and take something from it. I don't want to just get on here and blab. I think at this point, you all should know that the way I approach this podcast, I'm not doing clickbait shit. I'm not doing TMZ style shit. I just genuinely want to have rad Blink conversations and chat with fellow Blink fans. I mean, from day one. It's unfortunate for me that, when I look back, when I started this, I mean, I feel like that was a lifetime ago. I really do. And I think back and sometimes I'll see a clip on my phone or a memory on my phone, or I'll stumble across my own shit on my own YouTube algorithm, which is funny. And, I'm hard on myself. I'll see some of that stuff and I'll just cringe, or it'll just remind me of just how naive I was. And I was truly just so passionate about sharing this stuff and getting it out there. And here I am. I'm older. I feel like I'm wiser. I feel like I know more sides of how this stuff works. And I'm a little bit more hardened to the process. And sometimes I go through these little gaps where I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like, what am I wasting my time on? The band doesn't care about this. Yeah, I've got friends and listeners. Obviously, I don't do this for any financial gain. For me, it's all been about the passion and the creative outlet. And when you don't have time for your creative passions, it kind of puts you in a difficult spot. And so I think, with that being said, I have always said this podcast has to make sense in my life because it's a hobby. It's not something that I have 40 hours a week to just book guests and chat Blink 182. And I mean, gosh, I was chatting with somebody earlier. I'm like, I wish I could have a fan on every fucking Friday and hear all of your stories and hear all about how you got into Blink and just chat away, but it's just not feasible. Now, the other side of that is, I was thinking the other day, because I really haven't thought about the podcast for months, honestly. It's one of those things when you get too busy with life, the priorities just start going down and down and down on what you can feasibly do with the amount of time in a day. And for those of you who are dealing with similar things to I am between kids, life, work stress, etc., you'll find as you get older that your hobbies, stuff that you like to do, kind of goes down on the totem pole. And it just is what it is. But one of the things I was thinking about the other day, I finally started getting a little bit of an itch to make a podcast or do something because these things are kind of a beast to do. I don't know if everybody realizes what goes into this, but even if you nail it in one take, you still got to do some prep. You've got to set time aside. You've got to record it. You've got to edit it. You've got to list it. You've got to promote it. If you're doing an interview, you typically got to build graphics. That's just the audio and social media side. Then if you start fucking with YouTube, you got to get it up in there. There's a whole video component. It's just a lot of work. It really is. And I was thinking about it the other day because when I commit to even an episode or an interview, I mean, it's 10, 15 hours sometimes just getting all that shit put together. And I was thinking the other day, here I am. I listen to podcasts every day. It's something I look forward to every day. Um, Typically sports, or I listen to a lot of wrestling podcasts, which is a whole other story. And every day I refresh my little feed and I look forward to those, and I need those to get through my days. And they really help me, and they help me kind of escape in the moment, and they help me get through my work days or get through a jog or whatever. And I was thinking the other day, you know what? I was starting to get a bunch of messages about, is there a new pod coming? I'm like, I don't know, to be honest. I do these on such a whim. And I was thinking, I've built this thing up, and there are a lot of listeners out there who look forward to this in some capacity. I've half jokingly said from the beginning, I thought two chihuahuas would listen to this, my two, and I'd be lucky. But since then, this podcast has grown, and my hope is that a lot of folks, look forward to this in some capacity, and I know some do. And I was thinking, man, I kind of owe it to some of you to at least get something out, because if I can help you through an hour and a half of work, or a stressful night, or day, or drive, or whatever, then I should do my part to try and get that out there. I feel like we are vested enough. I truly feel like we're all just friends here hanging out, and I need to pop on here and hang out with you all for a little bit, regardless of the circumstances. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for listening. It's just something that, as much as I wish I had the time and the utmost energy and passion for, I don't always feel it all the time. So that's kind of where we are. There was a lot of stuff going on, really, when we ended off. Um, Blink had been touring nonstop. I mean, nonstop, it felt like. I was fucking exhausted, really just trying to keep up with them from my couch. So I cannot imagine how they felt traveling all over, playing in new places every night. I couldn't even point to a lot of these on a map. I couldn't even figure out what time they were going on. You're doing time zone math. I'm like, okay, they're 24 hours ahead plus 3 hours, switch the AM to the PM plus 4 hour. I'm like, I don't even know where the fuck they're playing and where. And this is something that from the moment we knew Tom was back, I knew it would be a big deal. And I'm sure they did too, in some capacity. That's why they kept it pretty hush hush for months and months and months. And then there was the big grand announcement and grand release of the new song Edging and the tour announcements, etc. And it's one of those things where at the time, and still, I was like, man, I am so happy for them. A, they've rekindled their friendship. That's most important. B, I hope they get to relive some of the stuff from their heyday. 99 through '03, before things got gnarly, or whenever stuff started falling apart. Even if just 99 through '01, before Boxcar Racer. I wanted them to be able to relive that because they've earned that. And yeah, some of the shows may have been a little bit smaller from 2011 through 2019 or whenever. Um, but I wanted them to feel like they were on top of the world again because in my mind, they always have been. And I think if you polled them at the time, I'm sure they said, yeah, this is a big deal. It's going to be a huge tour with Tom. Obviously, they're booking larger venues, stadiums. I don't know if they all knew it would be this big. And one of the things at the end of that last tour, the fan base was just getting really, really crazy. It seemed kind of out of control. Um, I see both sides of it. I really, really do. And it's not like it affected me personally, but I was just having a hard time keeping up with it. And it's almost exhausting, like seeing the complaints and seeing, people basically stalking them, to say it kindly, going baby reindeer on them. Um, and it's one of those things where it's like, gosh, your whole life, a lot of bands and people, you hope so much for that level of fame and for people to love you. And starting out, you'll have bands hanging out with fans after the show, and maybe you wait by the bus and you get lucky and you get to chat with a couple of them. And then it's so fascinating to me how when you get to that level, it almost gets to a point where it's like, this is kind of fucking weird. This is kind of fucking scary. Um, from the fans' perspective, this is the first time they were in their area, their countries, their cities for a lot of them. And for the rest, it was like 20 plus years in some of these places they hadn't seen them. So I get it. As a hardcore, diehard Blink fan, you hear Blink is back, you hear Tom is coming. You're going to be stoked. You may be saying, I'm going to go wait for these dudes all fucking day. They're my heroes. They saved my life. And as we saw, and it was beautiful to see, there were fan gatherings all over. I saw tons at the hotels. I saw signs all over. And then it just kind of starts getting into like, okay, but then people are sneaking up like outside of hotel elevators, people are chasing them, people are plotting out the flight paths and shit. And I was just thinking, man, like I know the 90s were gnarly, like 99 through '03, like top of the world. You're talking MTV gnarly. But I was thinking, gosh, this is kind of going a little overboard here. You're crossing that boundary. At the time, people were basically using Mark's Discord to like beg him to come out of the hotel room and shit. And I'm just like, man, this is really kind of wearing me out. Like, it's just, I don't know. It was just a really odd time. And maybe it's just me being too invested in this, but I felt like I kind of needed to take a step back for a little bit and just be like, man, I kind of need a break from all this too. Cause I'm having a hard time keeping up with all this shit. Um, Somebody posts something and then instantly it's on 20 social media Blink pages. And then I got 20 more people sending it to me. And I'm like, yeah, I saw it. We all fucking saw it when Tom posted it. I don't know why people are just reposting shit the band post. We all saw it. um, and then ultimately, you get to people complaining that the band's not coming out. They're not taking pictures. They're not signing. That thing blew up with Mark calling out the autograph stalker for trying to slang autographs, and maybe I'll hit on that just a little bit, but it's I don't know. It just felt like a lot to me. And I think at the time you combine that with them finally coming off of that new Tom back in the band, Tom's back in the band, new album, new tour. Really, that was just ending because those Mexico dates had got pushed because of Travis's finger being broken, which feels like forever ago. And then, as we know, the Mexico tour ended terribly. Mark's sick, Tom's sick. They had to cancel. It's just the worst. It just sucks. And it really just kind of bummed me out. I think personally, I was dealing with shit that I'm still dealing with, both mentally, physically, just like taxing. And I just needed to sit back and just take a chill pill for a little bit. And it seems like that is finally kind of dying down. Um, I get it from the fans' perspective, like these dudes are your heroes. But at the same time, it's like, gosh, like try to be respectful. And it breaks your heart, and you try not to take it personally, if you feel like they've let you down. It sucks. Like I've been in situations where like Tom has let me down. And you try not to take it personally. I've been in situations where, like, you'll wait for somebody in a band and you think they're going to come over and they just totally ignore you. And it sucks. It's not fun. And I try to remind myself, because I see the other side of it too, where it's like, you can't make everyone happy. You really can't. It's so hard. And it's like, Mark was coming out, he'll sign for an hour and finally he'll have to go. You've got family waiting on you, you've got everything's booked out to do that day. And the second you walk away, you'll sign for 100 people. The 101st person doesn't get their thing signed, and they're the one who spouts off on the internet and it gets blown up. And TMZ picks it up and it's on people's TikToks, and instead of seeing 100 smiling faces of people whose life Mark just made and made them the happiest person on the planet, it's the 101st of the asshole who's been there 4 days trying to sell autographs, blowing up. And it just makes everybody look bad. And then it makes you question yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like, why waste the time on doing it? And you can kind of understand different people's approaches. But I think the takeaway here is, try not to take it personal. And I will say, I am so hard on myself for that. It's tough. Believe me, it sucks when you feel like you get let down by an athlete or anybody. It's not a great feeling. But on the flip side, try to put yourself in their shoes. And I think one of the things that's just so important in those situations is, like, we will never know what it's truly like in their shoes. And especially after, I mean, they've been doing this for like 32 years. Granted, not all of that was with this level of fame. Um, but you have to kind of try and put themselves in your shoes. It's like, yeah, they've got a great job. Yeah, they're incredibly gifted and make music that means the world to us, and they're super cool. And we've all grown up with them feeling like they're our big brothers. And for the most part, they're all very approachable. But at the same time, it's like, when they're out or they just got done playing a show or right before a show, it's like they've got shit to do and they don't always have time to come over. And, try not to take it personally. Tom's approach is basically, I'm not signing anything. And that sucks, as somebody, especially as an autograph collector. That's one of my biggest collections I have. It sucks. Like, if you really want Tom to sign something, he's not coming over to you, even if it's just one or two of you. Typically, like, it's just not going to happen. And I think that's something that Tom has adopted for a long time. It's like, I'm not going to go over there and, you know, run into pissing off a few people when I've gone out of my way to try and make some fans happy. You can't make everybody happy. So sometimes it's easier to just say, I'm not signing. I saw David Grohl not too long ago. He used to get hounded like hell at the airports. And he finally said, I'm only signing if it's for charity. And I can kind of get that. Like, I think there are ways to go about things. My opinion, I think airport autograph hounding is just absurd. That is way crossing the line, in my opinion, especially like when you're at the terminal and shit. Like, that's fucking crazy. Um, and the thing about some of these autograph hounds, and I feel like I can speak on this, is you can spot these people from a mile away. You really can. So, the dude who was supposedly hounding Mark, and Mark asked him what are two songs from Cheshire Cat, and of course he couldn't answer it. You can spot those people from a mile away. They've got stacks of crap. They've got stacks of pick guards. Typically for musicians, it's blank pick guards. They'll try to have you sign 50. It's very, very rare for true hardcore fans to just randomly be waiting, in your terminal when you get off of a flight. Like, to me, that totally crosses the line. I think if you're going to hang out at a hotel, I personally wouldn't. Being in a different country that they've never been to or haven't been to in 20 years, who knows if they'll ever be back. I can kind of understand the fans' perspective. If you're going to peacefully outside, hope to get a glimpse of them. I get it. Maybe they're kind enough to come over. Maybe they're not. Being inside the hotel, waiting out an elevator, that's crossing the line, I think. And you have to respect whatever their decision is. I mean, it's a really hard thing to kind of swallow, but it's like, nobody owes you anything. They really don't owe you shit. And it's like, Tom typically won't come over. Mark's kind enough to come over usually. Travis seems to be going out, taking some pictures, maybe signing one or two things, not signing for everybody. And it's hard. Like in my perspective, I'm like, man, I just couldn't imagine not signing for those 40 kids who are waiting outside my hotel. But then again, I've never been in that situation. I don't know what that's like when I'm tired and I just traveled all night, wasn't able to sleep on the plane, trying to get my family up to sleep. And you've got 40 people, who knows if they're fans or if they're just trying to sell your autograph. It's tough and you don't know. And these people get, everywhere you go when you're at that level, people want a piece of you. They really do. It's sad. And I see it all the time. And it's something that even like for me, it's like I would never want to bother them for that type of thing. And from my perspective, the part that's tough as a collector and as somebody who, deals with these type of things, the part that makes it tough for me is like I would gladly pay any of these dudes to sign something. If I want somebody's autograph, I'm happy to pay for the time. I'm happy to pay for a meet and greet. I'm happy to pay to walk up to a table, fist bump you, and have you sign my record exactly where you want it. But the thing is, a lot of musicians don't do that. And Blink definitely doesn't do that, of late, whether it's they just don't want to, whether it's because of health since COVID. I think post COVID, a lot of bands really have kind of nixed that as far as, public meet and greets and photo ops and all that shit. And when you're at a level that Blink is at, you don't have to. A lot of the bands that do those, the reality is it's easy extra money in a business where they aren't making a ton of money. So, that's why when I go to a small gig or a smaller concert and there's a meet and greet add-on for 50 bucks, 75 bucks, I am more than happy to support that band. A lot of times you'll get a little acoustic 3-song set prior, get a photo op, get a signed poster, whatever. Like to me, that's the coolest shit. And so from a fan's perspective, if you want something signed by Blink, especially these days, it's basically not happening. And that's what makes it tough. So then you're left with, okay, what do I do? Well, if you want your album signed, you're probably going to have to go wait and be kind of a weirdo and hope and pray that one of them comes over and signed your little album. Um, so it's always a fascinating discussion and seeing how polarizing it can be. Um, but yeah, it's something that I've kind of paid attention to being in the autograph game. And the resellers, it just sucks, man, because they really kind of ruin everything for everybody. And it's not just Autograph Hound. You see it with tickets, you see it with shoes, you see it like anything that comes out. It's like everybody's just trying to make a quick buck and it sells out to the people who don't even want it. You'll have people stalking out celebrities off an airplane. They'll get 20 fucking things signed, but you, the true diehard fan, you can't even get your one thing signed. And part of you is like, well, what the hell? Why would you sign for them? But you can't make time for the fans. And it's just, it's so weird. And I think ultimately it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know. You get to the point where I'm like, I'd rather just buy it. But like I said, it can be very difficult when you can't. And I guess maybe in my eyes, that's what makes like a full band signed piece a little bit more rare, um, and a little bit more unique and has a cool story with it because of how hard it is to get all three of their autographs on a piece. So that's kind of a long way of saying there was a lot of stuff happening at the end of that last tour. I personally felt like I just couldn't keep up with shit and I just needed to like take my mind off Blink for a little bit. It was just a little wild. I've been doing this such a long time and it's like every day I'm just trying to think of like cool Blink shit. And finally I'm like, man, I just can't do this right now. Like I need to take some time for myself to just like watch a movie, watch a series, like read some books, um, which I have done. And so thankfully, I feel a little bit rejuvenated on this, at least as of today, um, in order to get a podcast out. So, I don't know how often these are going to come. Um, but, my hope is to continue them in some capacity, at minimum, just to hopefully give you all something to listen to Blink related wherever you may be. Another thing that caught my ear the other day, I heard one of the podcasts I listened to. He said that most podcasts don't last 5 years. And I was thinking, may take that as a challenge here. I think this one's right on the verge of 5 years or whatever it is. So, anyways, you know, I don't know when I'm going to be able to get these out. I will try my best. But I appreciate you all as always for hanging out and for just, chatting and giving me some sort of creative outlet whenever I feel like I'm able to pull it off. I did want to talk about some of the music a little bit. So, One More Time has been out now for several months. And I'll tell you, this is a product of, I think, this world we live in. It's like this 24/7 news window where it's like, man, stuff just kind of drops off the radar so quick sometimes. It feels like it's so long ago, but it isn't. If you would have told me in 99, um, the new Blink album had been out 6 or 7 months. Are you still listening to it front to back every single day and not really being sure about that answer? I'd be like, man, you're crazy. But there's so much stuff coming out lately. There's so many different things that I listen to that the new album kind of fell off of my listening list for a little bit, really for a couple reasons. One is that new Neck Deep album absolutely slaps. Like, I love Neck Deep. I think I did a video on the YouTube page. That might have been the last video I did. They had a new album. They have a new album dropped in January. It's self-titled. And man, if you're in the mood for just some good old, pop punk, yet it has a fresh feel to it, that new Neck Deep album absolutely rips. And when that thing came out, I'm still listening to that every single day. I cannot stop listening to it. There's a song on there called Sort Yourself Out that I feel is just the perfect blend of Toy Patch Blink and Newfound Glory, yet it feels modern, it feels fresh. It's just so good. There's a song on there called Go Outside. I love the lyrics in that song. So check that out. Neck Deep is a band that I fell in love with really on that Enema of the State anniversary tour. I had known about them, and I remember getting to those shows early. They were touring with Neck Deep and Lil Wayne, and I'd be front row, true nerd, getting there early, waiting for Blink to come on, holding down my spot. And Neck Deep would come on first, and I was just blown away by their energy. And I was like, man, these songs rip. But it was the live component that just absolutely blew me away. And so since then, I've followed them, and I feel like they're in such a great spot right now with their band. So check out that album if you haven't. I did go to a show. I'm trying to remember when that was. I think it was January. I think it was January. Caught one of their shows for that tour, and it was unreal. Like, totally catch them live if you can. Unreal energy. There was a band named Drain that opened for them that was gnarly. And actually, I just saw they are opening for Blink on a couple shows on this tour. That's sneaking up pretty quick. Another album is that Alkaline Trio album. I don't even think I've talked about this. Um, I really enjoyed this album. I was trying to compare it to Is This Thing Cursed? I loved that last album from them, and I'll tell you, it was fascinating to me at that time to hear what Skiba would be like at his home base in Alkaline Trio, because he was in Blink at that time. And I remember hearing Is This Thing Cursed and just loving that. I've given the new one so many spins. I think I still like Is This Thing Cursed more. I think the Dan songs I like more on Is This Thing Cursed. So that's where I think it probably wins if you go side by side. But I do love this new Alkaline Trio album. I mean, that first song, was it like Hot for Preacher or something? Like, that song absolutely rips. Um, Bad Time. I mean, I sing that song all the time. I probably listen to that song like 200 times. It's unreal. And that album had to grow on me a little bit, surprisingly. I don't know why. It had to grow on me a little bit. And then once it did, I really love it. So, huge shout out to Skiba on that album. Obviously, he's back at home in Alkaline Trio. Tom's back in Blink. Everybody seems to be at peace and rightfully back where they need and want to be, rightfully so. But I was curious to hear what Skiba would be coming out with, and it's just so Skiba. Like, the stuff that is on that album, it totally just feels like him zero boundaries, just writing exactly what he wants to write. And that's awesome for them because they have totally earned that right. Alkaline Trio sat for a while on hold, really, for a few years at least, while Matt gracefully stepped into Tom's shoes um, to keep Blink up and going. So I'm happy for them. I wanted to catch one of their shows. They had a show, there was one show I could have hit, and I believe it was like a Sunday night, and I was stoked to go drive to it. I was gonna have to drive back that night, work the next day, and then Disney on Ice fell that afternoon. So instead of hanging with Skiba, I was hanging with Elsa, um, but that's okay. It was okay, except for the shittiest icy in the history of the world. There was an icy I bought for my son. It was 15 bucks and an Elsa or in an Olaf head. It was rock hard. You couldn't even get your spoon into it. And so ultimately, like most of the show, I just held this melting icy, praying either of us could get any, sips of it. And it was just the crunchiest, shittiest ice. It didn't even come with a spoon. You had to buy a $5 Olaf spoon. I'm like, this is a $20 shitty ice ball on an Olaf head that basically melted in my lap and got all over my hands while the other kid was screaming, and then we had to go. So yeah, that was a weird day. Um, One of the things that was interesting about that album, though, if you listen to it, I heard them say this in some sort of interview or article, but the way they approached this album is they wrote all the instrumentals first and then came back in, listened to it, and dropped the lyrics and the melodies and all that stuff. And I found that so interesting because you can totally hear it. Like when I listen to, especially on some of Dan's stuff, there are songs where he himself has even said he's having a hard time figuring out how to play them live because his hands are doing one thing and then his vocals are trying to do another thing. And because he didn't write those at the same time, it's just weird. For those of you who write songs or write your own shit, you'll know that it's very difficult sometimes. That's one of the things that blows me away about some of the early Cheshire Cat stuff, like Touchdown Boy, for example. Try playing that on guitar and then singing that at the same time. It's really hard sometimes. A lot of songwriting is done, come up with a little riff, noodle around while you're noodling around or just playing that riff over and over. You kind of start humming, a melody pops in your head, you get the vibe, you start dropping lyrics, and then it's all kind of natural done at the same time. And it makes sense because you wrote the vocal melodies and the vocal performance the same time as the instrumental, or at least lead guitar or lead riffs. So to do that backwards, I thought that was cool, and I think you can definitely hear it. So I thought that was a different approach. Really cool, but stoked for Alkaline Trio. I didn't know what to expect, and ultimately, super rad album. Exactly what I want out of them at this point in their career, and I'm hoping they do some sort of second stretch on that. I thought I saw they announced one, but it was overseas, so I don't know if I'll be able to catch them on this tour per se. Um, which is unfortunate because it looked like a great time for everybody who went out there. Anyways, a lot of stuff has really been in my rotation, and when a new Blink album comes out, I play it just nonstop. And after 3, 4 months of it, I'm like, okay, I need to start getting into some other stuff, or you just need a break, or naturally it just kind of falls out of your rotation. But I thought after all these months, what is it that I'm truly revisiting? What's kind of dropped down on the totem pole a little bit? What's kind of raised stock? Um, the ones that I keep going back to are Anthem Part 3. And I love the message of it. I think it's just such a banger. And I think the way it opens the album is incredible. But part of what I love so much about that song is the lyrics. And even though the lyrics I think are still wrong, mental note here, if you ever drop an album, um, make sure the lyrics are right, damn it. Because if you're an elder, an old emo like me, I remember the days where I would get a new album and all of the booklets and the inserts had all of the lyrics. And that's the way that I listen to the album and read the lyrics and go along with it. Well, the lyrics were wrong. And it's like to this day, I still don't know if he's saying, my hope shit ends here tonight. That's what I think he's saying. But then the lyrics say, my old shit ends here tonight. I thought when I had Aaron Rubin on, he was working with them to get it corrected. Then I thought it changed on my little Apple Music thing when I'm reading the lyrics as I'm playing it. And it's like, you know what? I don't even fucking know anymore. I'm going with my hope shit ends here tonight. I like that. It's very similar meanings. My hope shit, I take that as like my dreams are no longer going to be dreams after today. I'm going for it. And to me, that's kind of the message of the song. However, my old shit also works. It's like my old ways. I'm switching gears here, really going to go for it, whatever. I don't know. But the moral of that story is make sure somebody on your team please checks the lyrics on your albums whenever they're coming out. But I go back to Anthem 3, I go back to Turpentine, Turpentine, however you want to pronounce it. That is one that to me is just already like such a standout in their discography. I feel like they recorded a music video for that a long time ago, right? Like I'm pretty sure that was a long time ago. So I'm hoping that is something that drops maybe before this next tour. Um, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure they did. And then really the other one that I revisit a lot is More Than You Know. And to me, like as of right now, if I had to pick favorite song on there, I think it's More Than You Know. And to me, it's just that banger. Like I still compare that to Hearts All Gone from Neighborhoods, where it just hooks you and the lyrics are fire and poetic. And I still think Mark's second verse there, like I shook all the leaves from the tree and left you with nothing. Like to me, that's still easily my favorite lyric on the album. So it's interesting. I'll be curious to see here in a couple months. I might end up getting back on a one more time kick, going through it again, and there may be other stuff that kind of rises to the top. Um, but at this point in time, when I jump to that album, those are the top three standouts to me. I will say, when I listen to the album in full, which is typically how I listen to stuff, there's still nothing that I'm skipping. So I still think it flows pretty well. There's some stuff, I don't think I've ever gone out of my way to listen to like the interludes and some of the shorter songs. But, overall, still extremely solid album. I'm hoping we get either some more hype around Turpentine, or, they've posted some pictures where it looks like they've been in the studio in some capacity. So I'm hoping maybe there's enough downtime to where they're coming out with a new song or something right before this tour. But shit, I was looking at my calendar. I'm like, oh my God, this tour is starting in less than a month at this point, which is crazy. So I was hoping that that last stretch really didn't burn them out. Um, it's one of those fears of mine where you don't want them to go too hard. It's a big deal. Blink's back, Tom's back. The fans are beyond stoked. You're selling an insane amount of tickets. You're playing huge venues. Um, I don't want it to be too much. And that was part of my fear with the fan stuff. You're in foreign countries, shit's getting gnarly, people are getting sick, and then to turn around and you're already back on tour. I'm like, I just hope they're getting a good break. Um, and I think they are. I mean, I think seeing them back in the studio is a pretty good sign that, they're fine. That's kind of where I'm at on One More Time. I saw something the other day that really just blew my mind. The California Deluxe album is 7 years old, and that is insane to me, man. Like, I swear, I still feel like it's 2021. There is one bill I pay each month where I have to write a check, which is absurd, and I have to get out my little checkbook. Some younger people listening, you may not even know what that is. I have to get out my little checkbook and I have to fill it out. And in the top right, I have to date it. And I swear to God, every month, I cannot remember what year it is. My hand just wants to put 2022, 2021, and I just start to jot down 24. I'm like, what? It's 2024. The Enema of the State 20th anniversary tour was 5 years ago. Nine was 5 years ago. That seems far enough. And then you start thinking about Deluxe and Cali. I mean, hell, we're going to be getting close to 10 years ago was the start of the Skiba era. That's crazy to me. So I was kind of reflecting on California Deluxe, and man, I was just such a huge fan of Blink and where Blink was at that time, and just the biggest supporter of Skiba and that whole era. Um, and it's just, one of the things that's weird, and I was like this when the Skiba era was happening. It kind of bums me out in some way to go back and listen to that stuff when one of the members is no longer in the current lineup. So when Skiba joined, I was so in the present where I was like so pro California era and stoked for them. And Blink was back and functional and happy and motivated. And during that time, I really didn't revisit Neighborhoods, Untitled, etc. I was just so in the moment and I was just California all day, California Deluxe all day, so stoked for whatever was going to come next. And as soon as Tom got announced, of course, everybody's stoked. But there was part of me that was a little bittersweet. Like, man, I love that Skiba era. Like, I had so many rad times. Honestly, some of the happiest times and trips of my life thinking back to that time period. And you get kind of bittersweet. And one of the things that I was thinking about with California Deluxe is just how stoked I was at that time. And it just feels like a lifetime ago. Like my life has changed so significantly since 2017. But when I think about that album and the release, and I can still just picture myself like listening to those songs for the first time and like, Misery blew me away. Last Train Home blew me away. Um, Bottom of the Ocean, like just so stoked. It was California, but it was a darker side of it, which is what myself and a lot of the fan base was kind of wanting. It's like, yeah, let's get some of that dark Skiba shit in this. And it was. And to me, I truly thought of that as a second album. To this day, California Deluxe came out with as a 2 disc or 2 times LP or whatever for the California OG tracks, as well as the deluxe bonus track, as if it was two sides, one big California Deluxe album. To this day, I have never considered the original California part of Deluxe. I have never listened to the California tracks on a deluxe press or on the deluxe track listing in Apple Music or Spotify, wherever. To me, it is truly a separate album, a separate little era, little mini era per se. But I was just kind of reflecting on that, thinking, holy hell, time is just absolutely flying. And that summer, man, that summer was awesome. That was one of the first times I really got to meet and chat with Mark and Skiba and Travis. And I just look back to that time period like just such a naive, like happy fan. And there was no disappointment. There was no pressure of, having to do anything or make a podcast or, deal with shitty comments or bickering or anything. I just feel like that was just such a good time. There was meet and greets, there was the sound checks, and it just seems like it was a simpler time. And now things, obviously everybody's excited and wouldn't have it any other way, but it's just like things are at a whole new different level now. And it's just weird when I reflect on it. I heard something the other day, it really kind of blew me away. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of our lifespan. You hope for 75 to 85 years. In the grand scheme of life on Earth and how long life on Earth has been around, our lifespan, when you compare that and scale that, is around like 150 seconds. And when I think about time and how quickly it's flying, and really uh, in a morbid type of way, how insignificant our little timestamp here can be. It's just trippy to think about. And as I get older and kind of reflect on that stuff a little bit more, I'm like, man, if you're on the verge of like making a big trip, or maybe you don't think you're going to be able to pull a trip off, or you're worried about the money, or you're worried about it, like go for it. Like fucking go for it. I didn't have money when I booked that meet and greet for Blink. I remember selling vinyl left and right, just hoping that I could come up with, I think it was like $400 for the meet and greet or something, where you got to like fucking hang out with them before. And now, 7 years later, I look back on that as like one of the coolest days of my life. I will remember that day forever. And it's something that, something popped up on my feed the other day, and it was people who were getting towards the end of their life, and they were asking them if they had any advice for anybody. And their number one thing was essentially like, follow your dreams, like, go for it. If there's something you want to do, go do it. You will regret it when you get to this point. And I want people listening, if you're on the verge of something, or you don't think you can do something, or you can't swing it, can't do this, do it, because you don't know when that might change. You don't know when your life might change. Shit happens every single day. And I'm just so grateful that I went really out of my comfort zone during that time, both financially and geographically, um, to go do that shit, because it was a rad time, and something that I'll cherish forever. But where I was going with that is, now that we are in this Tom era, this one more time era or whatever, I have found myself where it's like, it almost kind of bums me out to go back and listen to the deluxe stuff or the Skiba era stuff. And I don't know why. Like, yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm always going to support every single different version of Blink. But it's something that I just naturally, I think it's just to like, I don't want to be sad reminiscing about it, because those songs take me back to that time. So right now it's like, I haven't listened to California Deluxe in a little bit. And when I saw that it had been out 7 years, I'm like, man, I need to revisit it. But then there's also a little part of me where I'm like, but it might make me a little bit sad. I listened to Nine not too long ago. It had been a while. And gosh, I was hearing No Heart to Speak Of, and I was hearing First Time, and I was just fucking smiling, because it just took me back to simpler times, and when I just felt like, just, I don't know, just so happy and just uh passionate for Blink. And I don't know, it's just so fascinating to me how these songs just truly take you back to a certain time in your life. And that's the beauty of Blink. It does it for me with every album. It does it for me with every release. And there's no other band that does that for me. I mean, it's just crazy. So happy birthday to California Deluxe. Um, what a cool little era that was. So the new tour kicks off June 20th in Orlando. That is less than a month away. That is absurd. I don't have a ton to hit on here other than just being shocked that it's almost already here. I'll be hitting up a couple shows. I did see that Ticketmaster released what looked like that diamond stage setup, or at least the stage out kind of in the middle of the pit, similar to the last tour. So that's rad. I dig that setup. I think, I'm always going to try to be in the pit. So I think from that standpoint, it provides more people with an opportunity to be on the rail, more angles. So it's cool. That last tour, I mean, those pits were relatively small and chill. So no matter where you were, you had a pretty good seat. And I'm assuming if you're up in the seats, if the band is more centered or out a little bit further, it probably makes them feel a little bit closer regardless of where you are in the stadium. So that's rad. Once again, they're going to be playing like such huge shows. I mean, it's crazy, and that's one of the things that I feel like. I feel like Davey sometimes, where Davey mentioned seeing Blink in these smaller venues, and then he goes and sees them. I can't remember if it was Warped or wherever, which would obviously be a big show, but then he sees them where you're 10 or 15 feet away from the band when you're front row on the barrier. And it's like, whoa, it's just a different feel. And when you're with that many people, there's obviously all different walks of lives and of life, and different levels of fandom, casuals, um, whatever. But that's the stage that Blink is at. And I'm happy for them, especially at this point in their career. There's not a lot of bands that can do that. But as nerds who have been there in very small, rowdy pits, right up front, sound checks, meet and greets, etc., you can't help but kind of compare the two in some capacity. But it's going to be crazy to see. I think they're playing like Fenway Park. They're playing at like Petco. It's like, man, this is crazy. Like, Blink is just on top of the world, and feeling like, I mean, I feel like they're fucking Taylor Swift status with the places they're playing. And I know nothing about Taylor Swift at all. Um, but it's just crazy when you get to that level that you're playing to the crowds that they're playing at. Um, I don't have a ton to say about that. I hope we get a new song. I don't know. I mean, we're getting close. It would have to be dropping pretty soon, but maybe. I think there's probably, it seemed like that Turpentine video maybe, I hope that they get some more hype kind of rolling into this tour. I feel like it feels like something needs to happen, whether it's a new song or new video or something, just to kind of hype it back up a little bit more. Um, some of the other things, so Tom and To the Stars are coming out with a new book called Trinity. I dig these. Like I've said, I've always supported To the Stars since day one. I've read all the books. I enjoy them, but I also like reading, and I also like reading fiction and just crazy shit, period. So to me, it's not like I'm just doing this because of Tom. Like, I'm just doing it because I like reading new books. AJ Hartley is the author of this one. He's the one who wrote like Chasing Shadows, and I believe it was called A Fire Within, the two Secret Machines fiction books, and those are great. Like, he's an amazing author. I think he's retiring or on the verge of retiring, but he was a Shakespearean professor at some university or something. So a scholar for sure. And when I read his stuff, I mean, even if you know nothing about Tom or Blink, you could pick it up and just read it as a very interesting book. This one has something to do with like a nuclear testing site in Nevada, so I'm assuming this is going to be up the lines of UFO-ish in some capacity. But I did see like To the Stars dropped some sort of signed hardcover or limited edition. I think there were only 100. I feel like that was 2 or 3 months ago, but I jumped on that. I'll read that when it comes out. Not sure if I'll read it quick enough to talk about it on the pod in a timely manner or whatever. But if anybody wants to have a little Tom book club or something, let me know and we'll chat on that one. The other thing that really I haven't had a chance to hit on, Tom Starcaster did come out. So that had been teased forever. It's it's tough on some of the shit when like there's a lot of fans, there's a lot of people who know some of this stuff well ahead of time. And it's like, gosh, you kind of forget when you've known about shit for so long, like when it actually comes out, there's not as much of hype. It's like, okay, we knew all this months and months and months and months ago. But it's out. I mean, it finally released in the 4 colors everybody knew about, same specs everybody knew about. It looks rad. I have not had a chance to play one. Um, my hands, without getting too deep into it, are just fucked and it sucks. And so right now, like when I look at my guitars, it just depresses me because I can't pick them up and play them like I want to. It's more or less just a thing sitting in the corner. I picked up Tom's signature Strat. I literally haven't even plugged it into an amp, which is such a bummer. So part of me has almost like subconsciously been scared to even see one of these because it's gonna fucking bum me out. But I've been stoked to see these, and it's available local guitar center. You can get it on Fender, wherever. I mean, I've seen pictures of them all over. I've seen people picking up each color in hand. So stoked for that. But one of the things that I think I'm going to drop in here, there was a video that Fender did, and Tom is out on a boat with Jeff Pereira, a friend of the podcast, and they're just having a chat. I think this was shot overseas somewhere, it looked like. Um, and they talk about, of all things, the sticker Strat comes up. And I hadn't even seen the whole video at the time, and people were sending me like, "Did you see this sticker Strat? They're talking about the sticker Strat." I'm like, "Oh shit, let me peep this real quick." And I really got kind of emotional thinking about it because that thing was such a journey. And I think I'm going to drop it in here just in case you haven't seen it for some context.
Care.
You've never been sentimental about your guitars.
No.
The only one I've ever seen you be sentimental about is
The original.
You're the original.
Yeah.
The original Strat.
You found all the old pictures of it. You
Yep.
found all the old stickers, and you put it back together
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
And you were tripping. You opened the door. You were like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, I was tripping to see that again.
And it looked exactly like it had been restored to in the Damn It era. But it was also the same day that you were like, I actually just had lunch with Mark and Travis. I had a feeling that was coming based on your conversations with Mark being sick. You've always had that love for Blink,
That's a wild thing. You bring back that guitar on that day. That's interesting.
and how that all really started the return to Fender.
Yeah.
So there's the part where they're talking about that. And I just thought that was so cool to see those two just out chatting about that on a boat. And Tom talks about the original. Jeff mentions to him, and he had told me this when he delivered it to him, is like Tom was just blown away. And as you heard there, he said that's the only guitar he's seen him get sentimental about. And that's why that is so much more than just a guitar to myself and some of the hardcore guitar nerds for Tom and Blink. That was what Blink came up using. That's when they kind of broke that barrier of up and coming band to, damn it, it's that transition and it's dreams coming true. And that's why that guitar has always meant so much more to me than most of the others. And I thought it was so cool there. There's a moment, and if you're watching the video, you can kind of see it in Tom's eyes where he connects the dots and he's like, wow, you delivered that guitar to me on the same day that I had lunch with Mark and Travis for the first time, which is nuts. And you can kind of see it just flow through his head. And it almost gives you goosebumps to think about, like, what are the chances after all these years? And I play this all out through my head. And I think I posted something when I saw that. I was like, I don't know if everything happens for a reason, but when I start to play back how that whole project on my side worked out and how all of Blink has kind of worked out with Tom getting back in and going through with Mark's cancer and all that shit, like for all of that shit to magically align is crazy to me. Like that is absolutely crazy. And so for that guitar to be delivered the same day, like Jeff had been working on that for so long. Like we had been helping him with that forever. Like Sticker Strat Crew, shout out Sticker Strat Crew. The research that went into that, and this is Lutz, Davey, Q182. I'm there more or less for moral support and to get it up on YouTube and provide some sort of entertainment with the guides and the walkthroughs and getting that side of things. But the research side, that goes to those three dudes. But for that to take place, the passion that we had really just to document that axe and more or less create our own. Then I think about, when I first met Jeff and have become friends with Jeff, we actually have a mutual interest in baseball, really outside of Blink, and how he and I became friends. And then I became, friends with the Sticker Strat crew. We're all kind of working together. We get this in place. I list the Sticker Strat guides, all of those videos, which they're probably terrible. I need to go back and watch them, but anytime I watch any of my old shit, I just cringe. It's probably so bad, but at the time I was so proud of it. And we get that out, and I'm still playing this back in my head. Tom actually stumbled across that and reached out to me about it. Like I had a full on conversation with Tom about that. I still think to this day, I don't even know if Tom knows me as like a podcast guy. I think he just probably knows me as like the Sticker Strat YouTube guy. Even when I talked to him last summer at the show, that's what he knew me from. And for Tom to see that, and then for us to get those stickers to Jeff, Jeff using my guide, our guide, put it together, gifts that to Tom. Tom's blown away. Tom at the time has just found out that Mark has cancer. Maybe Blink is in the very back of his mind leading up to that in some capacity. I don't know. This was during COVID. Shit was crazy. And for those worlds to align on the same day, it's almost like that Sticker Strat was just like icing on the cake. It was just like a sign. And I know I'm overthinking that, and maybe that's just batshit crazy. And again, I don't credit myself for any of that in any capacity, but I still think it's just kind of crazy when you think about it that way. And what's fucking crazy is I remember Mark telling me that he met Tom and Travis that day. So I remember both sides of that from Tom meeting Travis and Mark, and then for Jeff delivering that axe, and for all of that to kind of magically align. And then all of a sudden it's Tom's back in Blink. And then all of a sudden here we are. And then to see that axe restored on display, he's back on Fender. I'm like, you cannot make this shit up. Like it's absolutely crazy. So that was really cool. I thought that was really awesome just to kind of see them chatting about that. Um, I've said before, I feel like I've talked about that Sticker Strat a million times, but just that fucking little story right there, I think if the podcast goes down tomorrow and nothing else is ever watched or listened to forever, like I think what Sticker Strat crew was able to do for that guitar is probably the most important thing we've done as far as like Blink fandom, Blink community, etc. So I thought that was fucking rad. I hope you did too. Um, Tom being back on Fender, Tom with his new signature. I mean, it's crazy. This past year and a half, 2 years, you really just can't make this shit up. It's completely surpassed any expectations I had had. Um, and I think, like all of you, I'm just kind of along for the ride. It's pretty wild. So, anyways, that's the stuff I wanted to hit on today. I know it's been some time. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to have time to do a podcast ever again. So apologies if you refresh your RSS feed hoping for a new 182 News podcast. Um, these might be fewer and far between, but I will say today felt good. This felt good to have this chat with you. Um, and maybe I need a little bit more of it. So, anyways, I'll get to editing. Talk soon. Thanks, everybody.